So I think it would be very interesting to do another little experiment with um, um, directions. And for this, if you could be standing a little ways away so you can see your whole self. Um, oh, we got another student today again.
He is a perfect example of doing nothing.
Oh, absolutely. He's doing nothing, but I bet he's ready to do anything useful that might help him out. Like
Always ready for a
if a
treat.
mouse were to appear, I think
He'd be
be
ready.
he'd be more than ready. Yeah. So let's do maybe come a little closer, just because you're
Want
there.
me to tip the camera a little?
No, this is fine. I think this is fine. Um, so um, could you go into a little slump? Yeah, and just feel what that's like, right?
Yeah.
Now, can you feel the pressure that you're putting into doing that?
Yes.
Yeah. So throw the slump away for a moment. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, here's something to try. Let's pick a direction that sort of appeals to you right now. You don't even have
Okay.
to tell me what it is.
Okay.
And what I want you to do in a moment is go into that slump again, but give priority to thinking the direction.
Okay.
If one has to give way, it's not the direction.
Okay.
So choose a direction and take that direction right with you as you go into the slump.
Okay. Go for it.
Go for it. Were you keeping the direction going the whole time?
Well, I tried to slump and direction, and I think it just happened so fast. Did you
So
want me to
slow it down. Slow it
slow
down.
it down?
Uh, don't be, go in the direction of going into a slump slowly, but
Okay.
continue with the self-direction, whatever it is.
Okay.
The whole is, you may forget it, but have it there in the background as much as possible the whole.
Sure. Okay. I got the thought in my head, got
Okay.
the direction,
And
and
now,
I'll start now slow.
yeah, keep the direction and slowly go into the slump. Does that going into a slump feel different than your previous going into a slump?
Yes, I can barely slump.
Yeah, and let's just do one more experiment. Could you do a kind of a classic standing up straight military style? Yeah, good. You can feel you can sense what that's doing to you.
Oh, yes.
You're lifting part of your torso, and maybe you
Hmm.
can sense that you're also probably arching your lower back a bit.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
So good. So just let that go for a moment and just stand there and using either that same direction or another one, um, go into that stand. I'm putting quotes around standing up straight because it's not really standing up straight. It's overarching, uh,
Overdone.
but
Okay.
just have the intention. I'm going to continue the direction and slowly go into that standing up straight pose and see how that
Okay.
works out for you.
Okay. I'm gonna start now.
Yeah. So it looks like you're having a little trouble pulling it off, right?
Well, yeah, it's affecting
Yeah.
my breathing.
Well, but do you notice that it's not that easy for you to do that standing up straight,
Right.
just as it wasn't easy to do the slumping.
Right.
So what's going on here is if you're telling yourself, let's say, let me know, what was the direction you chose?
I chose I'm not breathing because I think I need to play with that one more.
Okay. Uh, and you might want to play with do this same process where we just went through with another one, like maybe I'm free or I'm not tightening, I'm not compressing myself might be an interesting one.
Oh, okay.
We
That's a
haven't
new one.
actually talked. Actually, why don't you do that right now? I'm not
Okay.
compressing myself as I go into a slump.
Some? Okay, I'm gonna
Yeah,
go really slow.
yeah, but you're not compressing it. Yeah, so it's hard to pull that off. You can kind of sneak into it a little bit, but you can't do. Now, if you were to switch over to I'm green and go into a slump,
I can slump all day in that.
you could go down and it would be very easy to do. But it was not so easy with the direction because the
No,
direction is saying to your unconscious mind, this is what I want, and
right.
slumping kind of conflicts with that.
Yeah, it contradicts it.
And you may be able to push through really hard to get something, but it's not it wouldn't be so easy if you were just going about your day thinking a useful direction to inadvertently get into a slump.
Mm-hmm.
Trickier, you know, because I think you had to do some extra work on those two times to get into the slump or get
Right. It was like my body was telling me, I don't think you actually want that. Like you're slumping, but you don't want that.
right, right. Well, and this leads us to an interesting aspect of center of gravity that we've been talking about. So, we discussed like with power poses, raising your arms over your head and bending your knees. It's bringing your legs closer to your center, which is a couple
Mm-hmm.
of inches below your navel. Raising your arms brings your arms and hands further away from that,
Mm-hmm.
from your overall center of gravity.
Right. Can we do one of those together again,
Yeah,
quick?
sure. I'm sitting, but I'll just do the arms part.
Okay, sure. So
So,
when my arms come up,
and you just bend, right? And then on the way up, well, okay. So do that one more time. Just arms up, bend your knees, locate your center of gravity, and just tell it and just say, whoop, not yet. You gotta slow down here. Let me give you the whole spiel. On the way up, with your arms coming down, your knees unbending, you think, I'm not depressing my center of gravity, and see what happens. And what do you notice?
I'm not depressing my center of gravity.
You're not. And so you're getting the full benefits of the power pose. But the thing I wanted to get to in all of this is that
I'm gonna
there,
write some of this down.
sure, um, there, I think I mentioned last time that pretty much any activity you do is going to raise your center of gravity. So,
Uh-huh.
for example, walking. Well, part of walking is bending your knees, and
Right.
some maybe some swinging of your arms,
Mm-hmm.
both of which tend to raise your center of gravity,
Okay.
right? Can you understand why that is? Stuff that's above it is now further away.
Oh,
Stuff
yeah.
that's
Okay.
below is closer, and the center of gravity is just a reflection of that distribution of your weight
Yes.
or your mass.
Okay.
As physicists
Okay.
would probably correct me in saying it's more accurate, but they are really the same thing in this case. So there's almost nothing that you can do. Reaching up for something from a shelf, um, even bending over to pick up something, knees being bent quite a bit, that's really raising your center. there are two things, as far as I know, there are only two ways you can lower your center of gravity. Number one, you go into a slump without any directions, just slump.
Mm-hmm.
That moves some of the upper part of you closer to the center,
Yeah.
right? And so your center is now dropping a little bit internally.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing you can do to lower your center of gravity is like that. Pull your shoulders back, arch your back, pull your shoulders back, arch your lower back, lift your head,
Uh-huh.
right? All of those things.
That's a miserable feeling.
Yeah, well, it is, by the way, not that uncommon a phenomenon, maybe not quite as extreme, but that is a kind of a military or police or you'll see sometimes Marines guarding the president. They're all tend to be a little overstraight. That's a kind of a remnant from earlier days. Alexander, I'll send you a picture that he has a photograph in one of his books of a British sergeant major standing against the grid doing just an extraordinary example of that over straightening.
Mm.
And Alexander, you said, this guy he didn't know, I don't think Alexander was all that tuned into center of gravity, but what he said, this guy is putting himself in a position that if he actually had to do something like pick up a rifle and shoot it, he would not, it's not a very good place to be
Mm-mm.
ready for action or to be
No.
healthy.
Right.
And it's such an extreme photograph. I think I might have written a blog about it. I'll see if I can find.
Yeah, send it to
I'll
me.
send you something on that. But those are the only two ways that you can lower your center of gravity. So
Mm-hmm.
if you have the idea of not depressing your center of gravity, you're not pulling it down,
Mm-hmm.
that makes it kind of hard for you to go into either of those two possibilities.
Right.
And then if you were to add some like a power pose or maybe just even go for a walk, which would
Mm-hmm.
take would tend to raise it again, you can come out of it pretty quickly. But you're less likely to get into a slump if you have a useful direction that you're using.
Yes.
But you
I
may
like
go
that.
into a slump sometimes because you just forgot about the stuff and you were just whatever, you weren't thinking. Maybe you were zoned
Right.
out in front of a TV set and you suddenly notice that I'm scrunching myself. You could try to correct it by going the other way, but that just rearranges tension.
Yeah.
Here you're pulling down and in your front.
Yeah.
The other one, you're pulling
In the
in
back.
and uh, down with your back. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and actually, a little bit of history. There was a guy who was one of Alexander's most famous students. His name was John Dewey. And I don't know whether that name is around all that much in educational circles, but he was sometimes called the father of American education. He was like very influential
Was
in
he the Dewey Decimal System guy?
different Dewey. There are three Deweys. There's Dewey Decimal Dewey. There's Dewey who ran against Truman in 1948 and lost. And there's this famous picture of Truman holding up a headline saying Truman loses or something, but he has not lost. And then there's John Dewey, who was at Columbia University Teachers College, and he had a huge impact on American education. He was a big fan of Alexander's, and he actually wrote in one of his books. He has these lengthy books about his philosophy of this and that. I find them kind of tedious reading, but if you if you ever do read any of them, every once in a while there'll be some reference that seems a little out of place. And there's like one, he suddenly says, well, consider a man who decides he's going to stand up straight. And what happens when he does that? And as Dewey would say, all he did was make things worse. And he just sort of put some new tensions in to do that. And he even said, it's really bad advice ever to tell anyone to stand up straight. Hey, as a parent, this might be for you. Because
Well,
what does a kid do? Think of an 11-year-old, 12-year-old kid slumping,
yeah.
and his mother, and it's always the mother that gets blamed in these stories. His mother says, sit up straight. And he does this little exaggerated thing, and she's happy because he's not slumping anymore.
Mm-hmm.
His inner wisdom assures that he's not going to keep that. As soon as she's out of sight, he's back.
Right.
He doesn't want to. His inner body, his inner brain is probably saying, "Well, you have one habit that's not so great. Let's not have another habit on top of that that's also so great." So, and you could see if you watch people sometimes sitting, like if you were somewhere where there are a lot of people sitting in a library or maybe a classroom, you will see some people slumping and then coming out of it very dramatically. And then, and then they'll come back and they might have a third option. But none of them, like when you go from here pulling forward to here pulling backward, you've gone right through the middle where you're not pulling anything. But you're going so fast, and not you, but people are going so fast, they have no idea there's somewhere in the middle where they don't have to do any pulling.
Oh, wow.
And it's going
So
to be a lot easier on
is
them.
the direction is to get
Yeah,
that non-pulling middle, is it I'm not depressing my center of gravity?
that would be one
That's the
way.
direction?
Yeah, it would certainly be a way. And, or just pretty much any Alexander direction would work too. I'm not compressing myself. I think that is new this class, isn't it?
Uh-huh.
That's a really good one.
Are you saying compressing? I'm not
Compressing or depressing, either one. Compressing, just generally pulling in,
mashing it.
taking up less space. You could say, not allowing your body to take its full stature, its full expression. You're kind of squeezing in on it. And you start looking around with those ideas, and you're going to see people doing that all the time. You may already have noticed a few people who seems like they're actually doing some harm to themselves on a 24/7 schedule.
Right.
Yeah. So that leads me, I think that we did do a short bit on seated center of gravity a few lessons ago, but I think we should briefly revisit that, partly because I sort of messed up the terminology there. But so when you're sitting, when you're standing, your center of gravity is about 2 inches below your navel. When you're sitting, everything has shifted. Now, most of your weight is being borne by the chair or the stool. Some of your weight's being borne by the soles of your feet. But I'd say the majority is the surface of the chair, right?
Yeah.
So the relevant center of gravity when you're in a sitting position is quite different from when you're standing.
Right.
The way to easily locate it, we earlier talked about your sternum, the two little joints here where uh, the clavicles attach, and the sternum. I'm right at those two bumps now with my finger, and there's kind of a solid object there,
The sternum.
bone, it's the sternum. And if you keep tracing it down, I have to get this zipper out of the way. If you keep tracing it down, suddenly it comes to an end. You feel like a little indentation.
Yeah.
You feel that? That's the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's
Yep.
that's the level where your seated center of gravity is pretty
Mm-hmm.
close to that. So as you're sitting there, you could imagine a line going, horizontal line going through you, coming out at both ends with little arrow tips, right? And
Yep.
you could think, well, if I wanted to bend forward, I would just go forward but slightly down because it's actually kind of a curve, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, the curve.
and let's say I wanted to go backwards again, yeah. Now, let's say, and did you notice that when you made those movements, you did not compress yourself?
Yeah.
And just for fun, throw the direction away. I'm green, use that direction, and go forward and backwards a couple of times. And see if you can sense a difference.
Yeah, it's sloppy.
Sloppy, and probably there's going to be a little compression.
Yeah, it's heavier.
It's not as efficient a movement, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but where this can come in really handy in a couple of ways that might be relevant for you teaching. When you're teaching, are you sitting sometimes in front of the class, or are you mostly
I'm
on?
almost always standing, but I do pull the chair up to demonstrate things, or sometimes
Okay.
sometimes if the class itself doesn't necessarily need me to be directing, but
Hmm.
it's pretty rare. I'm generally standing when I teach.
Well, let's say you are sitting at a computer for a while, or
That's
let's
likely.
say you're in
Parent-teacher conferences, I am sitting.
oh yes, there, yeah. We
And I
should
have that
we
again.
should have done this before you're teaching.
Well, I have another one Thursday,
Oh, well, here we go.
so I'll take it there.
So um that's a perfect place.
Hmm.
Also, if you're in a theater situation or a concert, you're sitting in a chair, probably not the most ideal chair in the world, maybe a little cushy, maybe you're sinking into it a little, but you're finding yourself getting a little uncomfortable, and you'd
Hmm.
like to not just use a direction, but actually move a little bit with the direction
Okay.
in a way that's not going to be inappropriate.
Hmm.
Not going to everyone, like, you don't want to go, like that, for
Right.
kids. I can imagine in a parent teachers conference. Wow, just,
Excuse me, everybody. Just
yeah, really. But here's what you can do. You could even put your finger there just to remind you unobtrusively what level we're talking about. Imagine that line and just make little tiny movements forward, back and forward, even less than that, even less than that, just tiny, yeah. And that helps get you out of any sort of stuck place you might be. And if you wanted to really up the game, you could say, well, I'm free to move my arrow a little bit forward and a little bit back. Or you could just say, I'm free as I do it, or I'm not compressing,
right.
whatever, any direction. And you can do it in such a way that nobody's going to notice,
Right.
um, and can kind of free you from a little tension that may have snuck in.
Okay.
So I mean, directions by themselves are going to help a lot, but sometimes if you kind of get stuck in a position, what really helps even more is direction and a movement. A movement and a direction which together get you out of it more quickly than maybe just the direction could on its own.
Right.
So that would
Okay.
be a great tool to implement
Okay.
Thursday. And just play with it, play with just using directions when you can. Just get breathing would be a great one.